Okay, so I've got a couple of things happening here. We've got a live webinar and we've got a simultaneous Facebook live event that's happening, and I'm not used to this kind of technology, so bear with me. Bear with me as I get these kind of things figured out, how to be with people in a way that is supportive in our shelter at home COVID kind of thing that's happening. My name is Amatana Santi. I'm living in Piedmont, which is a tiny little city in the middle of Oakland, and in my little studio apartment here. And I first heard about Dipa Ma in 1979. I was at the University of California in Santa Cruz, and I walked into Jack Engler's class, and I was very taken by his presence and the things that he had to share. And Jack had spent 3 months in India doing some research for his PhD thesis, and he specifically went to India because he wanted to spend time with Dipa Ma and interview her, because he was wanting to understand what happens to people's minds when they practice meditation and they have awakening experiences. So I was 17 and in that class, and he had all of these amazing stories to tell about his own life experience. And I was so moved being in that class. I remember sitting on the edge of my seat, just like falling forward with excitement about the possibility of waking up and giving my life to the Dharma. And so I was riveted. I was riveted with his stories, and I was riveted with Dipa Ma, and I was just tremendously interested to know more about her and to meet her. So with everything that's going on in our world right now, it's such a challenging time, and it's also such a hopeful time. I'm taking Amita Schmidt's example. She has a Facebook group that she created on Dipa Ma, and since we have been in shelter at home, she's been posting daily quotes and sayings and pictures of Dipa Ma as a way of giving us encouragement of how to practice in this time. So taking from her good example, and also, even though I was in the class all those many years ago, I don't remember all the details. So I'm working with 2 books that she compiled. One is Knee Deep in Grace, and the other, that's this one here. And the other is Dipa Ma, The Life and Legacy of a Buddhist Master. That's this one here. And I am using some of the information that she gathered, as well as some of my own stories, just to weave together a time of sharing and storytelling, and just a deep immersion into this remarkable person's life, and what her experience was like, both in terms of some of the challenges that she had to navigate, as well as some of the blessings that she was able to understand and realize. So I am delighted that you're here joining with me. One of the things that would make me happy is to know where you are listening from. So if you're on Facebook, if you would post in the comments where you're listening from, that would be a delight. And if you're here on Zoom in the webinar, if you put in the chat where you're from, that would make me very happy. And that's great. So we have somebody from Barcelona, and David has said hello, and we've got somebody from Pune in India, and Pismo Beach, California, in Pennsylvania and Connecticut. So folks from all over the place. So please continue to feel welcome to share in the chat if you're on this webinar where you're coming from. And Ruth has come from Central Iowa, and we have someone from Canada. Atul is from Canada. So welcome everyone. I'm, I'm deeply, deeply, deeply delighted to see you here. It's great. So I'm going to try something else that I haven't done before, which is I want to share my screen and do a PowerPoint presentation so that you have more pictures of Dipa Ma. And so let me see about doing that now. And so let me share the PowerPoint, share, and I'm going to view and slideshow, and I think we've got it. Okay. Now let me see if I can find, okay, I've got the buttons, so that's awesome. So Dipa Ma was born on March 25th in the year 1911. And she was born into a family in East Bengal, near the Burmese border. And at birth, her name was Nani Bala Barua. She was from the Barua clan. And the Barua clan are the original Buddhist descendants from India. She was the eldest of 6 children. And Nani was close to her siblings, and she was the favorite in her extended family. The whole family was brought up very much in the traditional Buddhist way, which was they were brought up with the notion of generosity or dana, and they would regularly make offerings of alms to the monastics nearby, but they would also give alms to the Hindus or to anybody else who was in need. And so she learned from a young age the importance of giving and also the importance of giving without discrimination. She was smart and she had an exceptional interest in Buddhist ritual as a child. She loved going to the monastery, and it was unusual, but the monks allowed her to offer them food, to wash their feet, and to be close to them when they were giving their talks, which is not common for monks to do. But as was the case in India, her schooling ended at 5th grade, and when she was 12 years old, she was betrothed to Ranjani Barua. And so this picture here is when she was a young woman and her husband, Ranjani, and that boy is her baby brother. So what happened is that in the time of India, when somebody married, they went to go live with their husband and their in-laws. And a week after she married, at the age of 12, her husband was sent to Burma because his occupation was that he was an engineer. So she was in this household with these in-laws who she was frightened of. And she could visit her parents occasionally, but they would always have her back. They would take her back. So it was a painful time for her. And it was a lonely time for her. And she was often frightened of her in-laws. After 2 unhappy years, at the age of 14, she was put on a boat to go to Rangoon, which is now Yangon, to begin her life in a new country with her husband, who she had only known for a week. And when she got there, she was really distraught with the noise of the city and how busy it was and how confusing it was compared to the village life that she was used to. She missed her homeland and she desperately missed her parents. She was really unhappy. So she grew up in a family where her parents and her siblings educated her about all of her duties and role as a wife, as a head of a household, but nobody ever said a word to her about sex. And so her husband was given the opportunity, the honor of talking to her about it. And her response was shock, terrible embarrassment, and shame. And she didn't want to have anything to do with him, to come close to him or near him, but he was unfailingly loyal and very gentle and never forced himself on her. And after a period of about a year, they fell deeply in love together. But one of the things was that she could never conceive. And so they had tried and with no success and had gone to doctors, and none of the doctors were able to understand what the problem was or why or be able to help her. And so Ranjani, her husband, was very loyal and very patient, but her in-laws and the neighbors were not. And so what happened was they plotted on the pretext of illness, which was untrue, to get Ranjani back home. And they had set up an arranged marriage that they had put him in the position of accepting. And he said, absolutely no way. He did not marry Jnani on the condition that she was going to be able to have children. And he was not going to leave her at this point. And so he went back to her. And when he went back to her, he said, please know that I am here with you and that I encourage you to think of all human beings as your children. At the age of 18, Jnani's mother fell ill and suddenly died. And this was devastating news for Jnani. And her father was not able to take care of the 18-month-old baby, Biju, that the mother had left behind. And so the father sent Biju to Jnani and to Ranjani to raise. And so this was her little brother. And you can see him now. He's probably about 8 years old in this picture. Shortly after her mother died, she got stricken with typhoid and was in the hospital for very many months. And then in 1941, when Ranjani was 30, when Jnani was 30, Burma was attacked and occupied by the Japanese troops. So here she is, a young woman, still not having conceived any children of her own, living in this foreign country under occupied and having lost her mom and dealing with the heartbreak of all of this. So when the Japanese troops had invaded Burma, it was a time of fear, it was a time of scarcity, it was a time of tremendous hardship. And in 1945, at the war's end, Biju, who had then grown and returned to India to start his own family. And then at that point, a real miracle happened. After 20 years of marriage, Jnani conceived and she gave birth to a baby girl. But after 3 months, that baby died. And overwhelmed with grief, Jnani developed heart disease. And 4 years later, at the age of 39, she had another baby girl. And this baby girl was called Dipa. And so her name that we know her, Dipa Ma, means the mother of Dipa. Dipa also means light. So her name also means the mother of light. Dipa was a toddler when Dipa Ma fell pregnant another time, and this time she fell pregnant with the all-important boy child, and that child died at birth. And when that baby died, it plunged Dipa Ma into inconsolable grief. And so, being inconsolable, Ranjani, her husband, was taking care of Dipa Ma, taking care of little Dipa, working full time as an engineer. And one night he came home and he said he wasn't feeling very well. And within a few hours, he had died from a heart attack. And so within a 10-year period of time, Dipa Ma had lost 2 children, her husband, her health. Both of her parents were dead. She was a single mom in a foreign country. She was overwhelmed and completely grief-stricken. And so it was at that point when she felt she didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to live. She said, I had nothing and no one to call my own. That she had the sense that meditation was the only hope, that was the only thing that was going to be able to help her. And so at this lowest part of her life, the Buddha appeared to her in a dream. And this luminous presence in her dream softly chanted this verse from the Dharmapada: clinging to what is dear brings sorrow. Clinging to what is dear brings fear. To one who is entirely free from endearment, there is no sorrow or fear. And when she woke, she had a really clear sense that she must meditate. And on that first day in the meditation center where she went to, she was really clearly following the instructions that she had received. She was paying attention to her breath. She was tracking the sensations in her body. She was observing the emotions and the thoughts that were arising in her mind. Her concentration deepened. And then in the afternoon, she was very deep in concentration, and she tried to move and she couldn't move. And when she tried to figure out what was happening, eventually she looked below and saw this dog had clamped itself on her leg and she couldn't get it off. So after that, she had to go to the hospital and receive medical care. She received rabies injections, and the combination of all of that weakened her. And so she wasn't able to go back to the meditation center that required living on the 8 precepts and eating only 1 meal a day. So she stayed at home. And a family friend was called Menindraji, and he spoke the same language that she did, but he was also a meditation practitioner and was able to help her. He was also a meditation teacher. So she started inviting him to her house to help her with the meditation instructions. And eventually she went to the meditation center that he was practicing at, which was the retreat center that was supported by Mahasi Sayadaw in Burma. And her mind was very clear, and there were a succession of events that happened, penetrating light, focusing of mind. She was then seeing that everything was dissolving, everything was in pieces, everything was broken, everything was empty. And this was accompanied by or followed by an intense mental and physical pain and pressure. And then from that moment, her whole mind-body system shifted and her life was irrevocably transformed. Over the next year, she had other breakthroughs, and that was marked by similar pattern, but it was even more pain and more suffering. And so what happened was basically overnight, she went from being somebody who was physically sick and emotionally dependent, grief stricken, and desperate into somebody who was healthy, independent, and very radiant. So this is a picture of Jack Engler and Menindraji in India. Jack is famous for the quote in the 70s, "You have to be somebody before you can be nobody." And he co-authored the book Transformational Consciousness with Ken Wilber and I believe Ed Brown. He also wrote Psychoanalysis and Buddhism and Psychotherapy Across Cultures. He was interested in finishing or working on his PhD thesis, which really had to do with the nature of consciousness and how meditation was able to impact it. So he went to Menindraji and asked Menindraji for who his most advanced student was, and he said, Dipa Ma. So Menindraji had been teaching Dipa Ma how to practice with the absorptions, and Dipa Ma was able to master all of them. The absorptions of being able to be in two places at the same time, of being able to move through the elements, of walking on the air or diving into the earth, of being able to cook food with the heat out of your hands, of time travel, of going forward, of going backwards. And so Jack Engler had all of these stories of being in Dipa Ma's presence as they were doing various studies to see whether or not this was true, and also for him to explore how does the consciousness of a human being change when you practice meditation and have all this insight. So I was in Jack's class in 1979, and I remember just being so completely compelled with him as a human being, and the fact that what was so impressive about him was the way that he responded to the person underneath the question. And so I would go into his room. He was staying at Cowell College at UC Santa Cruz, and I would have we would finish class and I would have 25 questions for him, and he would answer all my questions, and he would say, please come back if you have any more. So I remember one of the stories that he told was that he was in Dipa Ma's room, and it was filled up with people, and Menindraji was there, and most everyone was a woman. And there was a man who had asked Menindraji a question about the nature of karma and how it is that only men can become Buddhas. And everyone thought that Dipa Ma was sitting in the back of the room asleep. But what happened is that she heard that and she perked up and she said very loudly, I can do anything that a man can do. And so that catapulted, everyone started laughing because they recognized how true it was, but also because it was really a striking contrast to the contemporary view of women in India at that time. And yet people really had confidence that that was what was true. And here is Dipa Ma in that very same room and talking with students. And so I had this strong aspiration to go and meet her. And eventually, 10 years after that class, was able to go and meet her and went into that very room with her and got to speak to her and see her and have a sense of what her presence which was like, which was just amazing. It was like being in the presence of a vast, still ocean of love. So when we would leave and she would put her hands on us and she would do this blessing chant, she would blow, and it felt like just being under this river of love. So Amita Schmidt created this website for Dipa Ma and has this video on it. And so I can share it with all of us now.
Shankarani Jati Jadi Payaya Parshati Oto Nibindito Tukke Shumako Vishuddhiya Shabbe Shankara Dukkati Yodi Payaya Parshati Oto Nibindito Tukke Shumako Vishuddhiya Shabbe Shankara Nuttati Oti Payaya Parshati Oto Nibindito Tukke Shumako Vishuddhiya Shabbe Shatta Shabbe Yogi Shuki Hontu Sake Minu Shabbe Vadrani Pashantu Ma Kunchi Dukoma Goma Shabbe Shatta Shabbe Yogi Shuki Hontu Sake Minu Shabbe Vadrani Pashantu Ma Kunchi Dukoma Goma Shabbe Shatta Shabbe Yogi Shuki Hontu Sake Minu Shabbe Vadrani Pashantu Ma Kunchi Dukoma Goma Himaya Dhamma Patipatya Buddhang Jemi Himaya Dhamma Patipatya Dhammang Jemi Himaya Dhamma Patipatya Sanghang Jemi Addainaya Dhamma Jati Jara Vyadi Marnamma Parinanchitami.
And so this was a picture that I took in her room. And I remember her giving us blessings afterwards. And that sense when we would leave and she would put her tiny little hands on our face and she would blow and she would chant. And that feeling of being seen, of being touched, of being enveloped in love. So when I first met her, I had come to Calcutta in order to meet her. And Calcutta is this busy, noisy city. And I had gotten out of the taxi at the Mahabodhi Society, and I walked up the stairs to the meditation hall. And there was a large hall, and there were a bunch of monks on the platform chanting. And on the floor, a few feet under the platform, was a bunch of meditation cushions, and there were a number of people that were sitting. And one person in front of me was swathed in white sari, and I was a few feet behind her. And I could just see this person, but I couldn't see her face. But as I was standing there, there was this pressure that was pushing me back. I could feel this embracing. And I thought, who on earth is that? And then I found out, of course, that was Dipa Ma. So when I I was there in India for a few weeks. We were staying at the Mahabodhi Society. She was living in this apartment that this picture was taken in, which was across the town. And Matthew Daniels and David and another friend of I, we would walk across town and we would spend time in her room. And I remember one of the things that for me was just so impressive was I was born in California, and I had this strong sense of power. As you know, you grab a chainsaw, you jump into the back of a pickup truck, and you go off and you sort out the world. And yet, here with Dipa Ma, there was such a different sense of what power meant. It was so strong and yet so loving. It was so present. It was so kind. It was so deep. And it was so playful. So after I went to, after India, I spent time in Thailand, and this was me, this is me here uh, at Ajahn Chah's monastery in Thailand. And then I went to Amravati and I became a novice, and then later became a nun. And then one of the things that I wanted to do was plant a tree in memory of Dipa Ma. And so with a few other nuns, we had a very simple ceremony in the back, and then we planted the tree. And that picture that I had taken in the room, I had it with me, and I would put it in these tiny little branches, and I would do walking meditation back and forth. And sometimes I would think of Dipa Ma, and sometimes I would chant. And when I planted the tree, it was a tiny little tree. It just looked like a twig. And then it grew. And then for a period of 5 years, I was wandering and spending time in different monasteries. I was in Australia and I was in the United States. And it didn't have the stone and the sign and this wood that I had later brought towards it to mark it. It was completely unmarked. And so I came back and I was trying to find where the right tree was, because there were a whole bunch of trees in the back field of the Buddha Grove at Amravati, and it had no marking on it. So I just went to each tree and I put my back against each tree, and most trees felt like a tree, you know, with the stiffness, with, you know, rigidity. But when I got to the tree that it felt like I was standing under a waterfall of love, I thought, oh, I know which tree I'm at. This is Dipa Ma's tree. So again, before I had marked it, before we had this sign painted, before I had brought this stone from Colorado back to it, before I had brought this tree root there, it was an unmarked tree, and I hadn't spent a lot of time talking about it or telling stories of Dipa Ma. And one day I was at Kathy and Sam Holter's house. Ajahn Kovida and I were having a meal. And Kathy was talking about the mother tree in the back field of the Amravati Grove. My eyes got very big, and I thought, mother tree? Exactly where is that mother tree? And she described it. And she had found it and called it a mother tree by virtue of its loving energy, without having any context about it at all. So another story that I want to share is the story of being with her in Calcutta. And we were there for a few weeks, and they were very generous to invite us to join them on their family outings. And once we were going to an outing because one of the members of the Barua clan had they had just gotten an apartment, bought a house, like an apartment, like a condominium. And it was a real celebration because it was a real raise in standard of living For those of us living in North America, it seemed like a very modest house. But for them, you could see there was just such joy to have a place that had a television and had electronic gear in the kitchen. And there was this big festival with food and drink and a big party. And I was walking with Dipa Ma up the stairs and holding her shoes and just noticing the way she was, which was just relaxed and clear and confident. And she walked into the house. She walked through all the people. She didn't look at the food or the drink. And she just went to the Buddha and bowed. So I'm closing this part of the talk with this other video compilation that Amita Schmidt had made, again to see more pictures of her and to hear her words inviting us to contemplate the legacy of Dipa Ma, whose life was devoted to clarity and kindness, who had lived with such suffering and became such a beacon of love. The power of her mind, she had attained all of the absorptions. She could do all of the psychic powers. And yet the quality of her that was the most palpable, the most tangible, was this deep, immeasurable sense of presence and love. And her encouragement that no matter where we were, no matter what our life experience was, no matter how hard or challenging the circumstances were that we were navigating, we could always begin exactly where we were and meditate.
Sometimes I get emails or communications from people feeling that Dipa Ma still guides them. In a way, I feel this could be true because her message is timeless and it's available to all of us here now. It's available in how we use the Dharma in each moment of our lives, how we tie our shoes, how we stroke a child, how we listen to this talk right now. And she also encouraged us to keep a completely open heart, to welcome everyone with love. She was always concerned about how people were doing and did they need help and then did they need to be fed. And she would stroke people, stroke their hair and let them cry in her presence. She always had a completely open heart and a complete dedication and fierceness to show up in each moment with authenticity. She wasn't trying to, but she became a living prayer. She was able to wed mindfulness and loving kindness as one. And her invitation to each of us is to let ourselves become this merging of mindfulness and loving kindness right now and from every moment forward. Are you willing to let this happen? Are you willing to foster this as Dipa Ma's legacy to all of us?
And so I invite your comments or your questions, if you have any, about Dipa Ma. And if you are on the chat, you can put them in there and I can respond to them. Or you can put them in the Q&A and I can respond to them. But for me, She impacted my life because I had in 1979 a very strong aspiration to give my life to meditation. And when I finally did have the ability to meet her, I felt that if my life ended at that point, it would have been enough to know what this quality of loving kindness is like when you practice, to know what the quality of presence, of peace is like in another human being who has put the teachings into practice. And that gave me a tremendous boost in my own practice to continue to deepen, to study, and to weather the challenges that I have also lived with. So if I'm not seeing questions coming in the chat box or in the Q&A, then what I'd like to do is just to spend a few minutes meditating in silence, and then I will guide us in a loving kindness meditation as a way of ending our time together and sharing blessings together. So wherever you are, just taking a moment and letting your body settle, feeling your spine upright, letting your neck relax, your shoulders relax, your arms relax, letting your belly relax. And if you are in a comfortable place and you feel at ease, allowing your eyes to close. And as your eyes close, turning your attention to the weight of your body, the shape of your body, the temperature of your body. And knowing these sensations, and now gently turning your attention to your breath, feeling the cool air coming in, the warm, moist air releasing. Now just using your imagination, imagine Dipa Ma is here right in front of you with her tiny hands clasping your head with such tenderness, with such love, that she's chanting and she's blowing a blessing over you. And you feel the presence of her love, and that love fills you up. Even if there's sounds that are disturbing or distracting, the main thing that you notice is you're filling up with this quality of love that sees you, that knows you, that touches, embraces, and is vast, vast as the ocean, vast as the sky, vast as the earth. And as you feel this love filling you up, filling your body, seeping into your bones, into your ligaments, into your organs, into your nervous system. Notice what happens. Notice if there's more relaxation, if there's more lightness. If there's more sense of spaciousness. And as you fill up with this love, know that this is not just Dipa Ma's love. This is the nature of love. And this nature of love is present here in this moment. It's the other side of mindfulness. It's the embracing quality of mindfulness. It's the warmth, the interest, the closeness feeling that comes with mindfulness. And as we feel it and let it fill us, we can then allow it to extend outwards, sharing it back with teachers who have been important in our life, mentors who've helped guide us, offered us instruction. With our Sangha members, where we practice together, cultivate together, support each other. With our family and our friends, our colleagues at work, our neighbors, and letting it spread out in wider and wider circles until all beings everywhere, known and unknown, near and far, born yet to be born, those who have what they need and those who lack, those who have health and those who are not well. On every edge, in every domain, in every part of the world, filling people up with this loving kindness that is embracing, that is clear seeing, that is pervasive. And coming back to feeling your own body, heart, and mind in the room that you're sitting in, on the earth underneath your house, on the chair or cushion, feeling your own legs, trunk, arms, and hands. And opening your eyes. And let me see the questions. No questions, just appreciations for this time and for this webinar, for these efforts. And so I'd like to close now with sharing of blessings, just allowing you to appreciate the time you made to come and join us together here, all together from different places all over the world. That may we have safety, may we have basic needs, may we have the support for teachings, the support to put meditation guidance into practice. May we have insight. May we live with peace and freedom with a kind of independence that is not dependent on what's going on in the world around us. May we be free from fear, from confusion, from the suffering of our reactivity. And may the blessings of our life and our practice and the gifts of people like Dipa Ma, whose pain and challenges and struggle has been transformed into blessings, into wisdom, into compassion, be a force of goodness for all beings, that all beings everywhere, near and far, can feel safety, that all beings everywhere can have the basics that are needed for life, that all beings everywhere have kindness and support and a sense of belonging in their communities, have access to teachings that are deep, that are vast, that lead to freedom, that show a way of being unshakable, that show a path of true independence, even while we know we are completely interdependent with the people and the world around us. May all beings everywhere be free. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And this offering has been done out of care, out of kindness, out of generosity. And if anyone is interested to make an offering, the offering will go into a scholarship fund to make it possible for people who do not have easy access to the Dhamma to be able to attend. So I will, the donations at awakeningtruth.org is the PayPal address. You can find that on the website, awakeningtruth.org. And I wish everyone well. Take care. Bye for now. Be safe.